Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the 43rd Malaysian Architecture Education Online Series, proudly presented by MASA. Hope you guys are doing well, and thank you so much for joining us again tonight. So for those who are new, let me introduce what MASA is. MASA stands for Malaysian Architecture Student Alliance, and it is a non-profit student committee acting directly under PAM, Persatuan Architect Malaysia. We are a collaborative effort between students from all architecture institutions in Malaysia. During this time of MCO, MASA and PAM have decided to launch this online lecture series for students to be more productive and gain more insight. Architect Adrianta is the head of PAM Education and Dr. 𝐒𝐞𝐿 is the convener. My name is Rui Fang, a MASA representative from University Technology of Sarawak, UTS, and I'll be your moderator today. So first of all, I would like to introduce the speaker for today, Dr. Miguel Robles. He is an associate architect at the VERITAS Design Group since 2018 and aims to become a registered architect in Malaysia by 2022. Dr. Miguel's professional development has grown parallel to VERITAS' goal of achieving a more global presence. From a strong research background and passion for the architecture disciplines, he is oriented to create resilient, innovative, change-making, and memorable design globally while keeping the highest standards that VERITAS has pursued since 1987. So currently, Dr. Miguel leads several key projects at VERITAS. Among those, he plays a leading role in one of VERITAS' state-of-the-art projects, the Oxley Towers in KLCC. It is a 80-story mixed-use development with completion targeted by 2023. Miguel has widely spoken on design at several universities in Spain, Italy, and Malaysia, participated in numerous local and international design conferences and forums, and even was featured in several local and international magazines. So, with the talk today on principles for resilient design in architecture, we will step into the realms of sustainable and resilient design. Sustainability being the ability to maintain a steady condition over an indefinite period, and resilience being the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. These two concepts are very tightly intertwined to produce a good design. So let's sit back and relax, and we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the talk. But if you have any questions during the sharing session, please feel free to type them down in the chat box so we can attend to them at the end of the sharing. So without further delay, let's welcome Dr. Miguel to the main floor. Hi, Dr. Miguel. Let's say hi to the audience. Doctor, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Rifan, I was saying that thank you for the introduction. Eventually, you didn't cut anything. You said everything. So it was a very long introduction, but that's fine. I hope that our audience didn't get bored already by listening to what I have done before. I will share my screen now. Should I?
Yep.
Okay. So, can you see my slides?
Yes, I can.
The sound is clear and the slides are clear as well, right?
Yes, all good.
Okay, thank you. So, how many people do we have with us now? Can I know that?
We have 26 people with us right now.
26 people. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe they will join after dinner in a while. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rifan, Jason, 𝐿, and MASA for inviting me to give this talk today in a very consolidated already platform. And I would like to as well acknowledge MASA's Malaysian Architecture Students Alliance for this great sharing initiative and for the effort that you guys put in place to bring knowledge to architecture students throughout the entire country from all universities is really commendable. I hope that you all had a good dinner or having a good dinner. The talk will last about 60, 70 minutes at most. I will try not to speak longer than that. Please don't fall asleep. It's a Saturday, but the night is still long ahead of us. One of the key messages that I would like to convey today is that sustainability, and in this case, resilience, far from being any concept, any new concept or idea, are as old as architecture itself is. This means that the environmental capabilities of any building, and with environmental, I mean buildings' ability to respond to the context, whether climate-wise or social-wise or economy-wise, are implicit in its own architecture and in the way the building has been planned and how this planning has taken into consideration the environmental demands of the region. The relationship between environment and the context and the design can be observed in popular architectures all over the world. For example, the Mediterranean vernacular constructions shows architecture's ability to adapt to the environmental conditions of the place. In this case, the required protection from the sun translates into thick walls, wide cubic volumes, and flat roofs that are at the same time used for rainwater harvesting. Also, the imposed requirement of building with materials that are nearby, as well as the technological capabilities of every moment, have created architectures and forms that are that belong to a certain latitude and climate. This means that architecture has always responded to the environment and to the context or the conditions of a certain place. Locally in Malaysia, the longhouse, or in Indonesia, the Batak house, are other examples of how architecture has traditionally adapted to the specific environmental conditions or demands of a place and the available technology to generate its own constructive systems and typologies. This means that architecture has always, and not only recently, tried to respond to the environmental and the contextual conditions of a particular place. Likewise, at Veritas, we did not start doing sustainable or resilient design in our buildings only recently or only a few years ago, when these keywords became popular or usual in the industry or the society. Indeed, the preservation or the restoration of the environment through what we do, through the buildings that we do, has been a core part of our business and our practice since Veritas started in 1987. And I will show you today, or I will prove you today, or demonstrate you today how environment is actually one of the key core values of the 5 Veritas core values. In 2004, we created our Veritas Fund for Excellence, through which we dedicate a certain portion of our annual profit to initiatives that further innovation, design excellence, and social responsibility towards the built environment. In 2007, we created our Veritas Care scheme to monitor in-house our own carbon footprint and to promote a responsible use of resources and energy and spaces in our office, and to also incentivize those colleagues contributing significantly to our objective to become one day a carbon neutral practice. In 2013, soon after GVI was launched, we saw the opportunity to create our own sustainability consultancy, Veritas Environment, which is now delivering with a team of engineers, in-house engineers, green certified new projects all over the country, but also is helping building owners to improve the environmental performance of existing buildings. And I will show you as well some examples of this later. More recently, after having done so many, more than 35 indeed certified buildings, green certified buildings worldwide, we understood that we were ready to launch our own green assessment tool, our VERITAS Green Check, that allows us from very early stages in the design to understand how our buildings can respond better to the environmental demands and how can be sustainable, and also to help our clients to focus on the areas that are key to when they want to apply or they opt to apply to any of the conventional green rating certificates or tools in the industry. By the way, we are in the process of getting our VERITAS Green Check endorsed. So hopefully soon this will be one of the usual industry tools to certify our green buildings in the country. 2 years ago, when the current health concern started, I will not mention those words throughout my entire talk. I have banned myself from saying those. We understood that it was important to go beyond sustainability towards a more complex concept that talks about our preparedness, our buildings and our cities, societies, and the people to face another set of challenges or crises and to bounce back, to be able to recover quickly and to resist. Some of these challenges are natural and some are caused by human beings. Some may affect the entire world, like the climate change or the current health concern, or some are more common to this region: haze, flood, sometimes blackout, or as well as some political instability that may cause sometimes some civil unrest. Both these concepts, sustainability and resilient, are tightly intertwined and operate together. But perhaps we could say that while sustainability tackles a part of the matter, resilience is a much wider subject matter. In VERITAS, we have put in place since early 2000s a set of life, always evolving guides or guidelines to help us to tackle, to respond to the new challenges that the environment, in this case, the built environment, faces. So before we move on, I would like to define a couple of key concepts, just a couple of manual definitions. On the one hand, sustainability, which is the ability to maintain a steady condition over an indefinite period of time. And on another hand, resilience, which is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So sustainability is about establishing and maintaining the systems required to assure long-term sustainability or existence, while resilience is about quickly and consistently being capable to recover, to overcome crises, disturbances, or disruptions. So what does resilience entail when it comes to buildings design? To design a building with resilience means to start the design process by assuming the natural or man-caused situations that may distress the normal use and operation of a building by challenging its integrity, or by endangering or by causing disruption or disturbances to its occupants. So resilient design is always local or locally specific, as the environment plays a critical role in determining the factors that make a building resilient or not. We have studied the aspects that make or the considerations that help us to determine whether a building is resilient or not, or to what degree a building may be considered resilient. And we have categorized those notions into 7 principles for resilient design in architecture. Redundancy, which is the integration of duplicative systems and structures. Adaptability and flexibility, which is the ability to respond to the local context and to accommodate the changes to environmental and social conditions and needs. Interdependency, which is the ability to offer a holistic approach to not only the building, but the site, the city, and the community. Regenerative and restorative, that talks about the incorporation of systems that reduce the demand on fossil energy sources and infrastructure systems while reducing the carbon footprint of the building. Durability, which is the ability to offer long-lasting, long-term value to our buildings. Value, the capacity to provide social, environmental, and economic benefits to the surrounding community. Cultural responsiveness, last, cultural responsiveness, which is the ability to reflect the local culture and to create long-lasting memories for the community. So you can see that some of these principles are purely technical or engineer, if I may say. Some are passive, related to the way we place certain systems or make certain decisions during the design process. And some of them are active and require certain capital investment by the building owners. Some of them last are social or cultural, almost, I will say, philosophical, because we may say that they are intangible, although their benefits are pretty much visible. We will see examples of all of these principles for resilient design right next. We start with the first. The first principle is redundancy, which talks about this duplication of structural systems that may prevent the building from a collapse under the event of a catastrophic structural failure. We have as well duplicative mechanical and electrical systems that allow uninterrupted supply in the event of services disruption, and as well duplicative security or safety systems that ensure the integrity of the building or the safety of the occupants during emergencies, during accidents or crises. And redundancy also talks about how these structures and systems can be designed and streamlined to achieve their maximum efficiency. The 11th September 2001, you all were born, I suppose, but very young, the catastrophe in Manhattan, the terrorist attacks in Manhattan, changed forever the way we design tall buildings today, indeed super tall buildings in this case. So you can see at the bottom left corner of the slide, the floor plate of the former World Trade Center with its steel core and exoskeleton, which made the building unexpectedly vulnerable to terrorist attacks or ultimately to fire. After several years of skepticism about whether we should continue or not to do tall buildings or mega tall buildings under the fear of those buildings becoming terrorist targets, engineers and architects came out with a solution called buttress core. This is a structural design geometry that duplicates the possible paths for the building loads and forces to reach the ground. This means that this system prevents the building from a progressive collapse under the event of a catastrophic structural failure, because the loads can find an alternative path to reach the ground. The buttress core was used in the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, that you can see as well in the slide. It's the tallest building in the world, but also in our Oxley Towers, a 345 indeed meters height super tall building in KLCC. There are also mechanical and electrical systems that can be rethought, reconfigured, or just relocated to make our buildings more resilient, to improve our buildings' readiness to face challenges and to bounce back after a crisis. Some of these systems are present as well in our Oxley Towers project. For example, there are backup transformers This means that all components have transformers that can take over in case of malfunction of the main transformer. All the essential distribution boxes are backed up by diesel gensets. All the chillers and pump sets are also backed up by additional standby pump sets. All these backup generators and pumps, usually located at the basement, what renders them unusable in case of flood, may be relocated to the podium. And the domestic water storage tanks, instead of providing the usual 2-day water storage, may be provided for 4 days in 2 separate tanks. So in case that one is rendered unusable due to maintenance or the water is corrupted for any reason, we can still have another one. We can still rely on another one to ensure that there is no water disruption. Also, redundancy in the security systems can contribute to making our buildings more resilient and ready to face any security threat or breach. We talk about fire control centers and security control rooms distributed throughout the building, but also about other security features or devices that can be incorporated throughout the building to prevent different security hazards, such as usual boom gates or vehicle scanners, access cards, CCTV turnstiles. But you may consider as well that other features commonly used, like destination-based lifts or shuttle lifts that force visitors to pass by 2 tiers of security, 2 levels of lobby, are as well measures that enhance the security in our public buildings, especially those of very large scale. Luggage scanners, biometric scanners, and even the independent accesses for staff and for visitors with different sets of safety or security measures are considered as redundancy in the security features of a building. As well, when we talk about tall or very tall buildings, in this case, we refer to buildings that must fight the fire internally. This means that these tall buildings require, in general, far more robust considerations of both its passive and active firefighting strategies. Some of the easier or more immediate design passive considerations that we can impose to our tall buildings to make them more resilient are the provision of wider staircases that overcome the counterflow and the congestion due to slow evacuation and fatigue, the use of performance-based fire engineering for critical areas such as atriums or large public spaces at high floors, sky decks, sky restaurants, and etc., where the performance of the fire or the smoke or the people must be simulated to anticipate and design better our buildings to behave in case of fire. The use of class 0, so non-flammable, and class A1, so non-combustible fire-resistant materials to limit the fire load in our buildings, and of course, the regular maintenance of and testing of the fire protection systems. Talking still about fire evacuation or fire safety in buildings, especially again in tall or very tall buildings, we must consider as well or anticipate throughout the design process how the evacuation of our buildings will be. In general, there are 3 evacuation strategies. Total evacuation. This is the traditional strategy. Everybody gets out from the building, but this may be impractical for tall buildings or for very tall buildings. And as the simulations show that it takes more than 3 hours to fully evacuate a very tall or a super tall building due to the high occupancy, people getting fatigued or tired, or people with disabilities who may block the staircases, and of course the counterflow of the firemen going up. In these cases, when total evacuation is not possible, we must or we should consider a phased evacuation. This means that there is a sound alarm and public address system that permits a phase or allows a phased evacuation of certain components, so those that are in danger. We can also, and we do use in our project in Oxley, sky bridges to cross from one tower that may be on fire to the adjacent tower, so people can use the normal lifts to evacuate the building through the adjacent tower, or refuge floors where occupants can safely wait until being rescued. In recent years, and especially in super tall buildings or in mega tall buildings, the use of elevators for evacuation has become more and more common. Last, the called stay in place evacuation, which basically relies on the very rare chances for a tall building to collapse due to fire. So in this case, it may be just safer to stay protected within a fire compartment, within the hotel room or the apartment, especially for those away from the fire, especially in residential high-rise buildings where the compartmentation has proven to be very effective in preventing the fire spread. Adaptability and flexibility is the second of these resilient design principles and talks about the building's ability to respond to the local context and to accommodate to changing environmental and social conditions and needs. But it also talks about the ability of a building to be retrofitted or repurposed in the future. In this regard, there are two factors related to the floor plate design that are key. First of all, the efficiency. This means to ensure that the floor plate has a certain size that assures a commercially viable efficiency, ideally around 80% of the floor plate. And second, the depth of the floor plate to be such that we can ensure that daylight can penetrate up to the bottom of the floor plate. On the screen, there are a couple of examples of buildings by us, by VERITAS. Menara Prestige, an office building in KLCC, and also, again, our Oxley Towers, a mixed development in KLCC. Talking about the ability of a building to be retrofitted, the choice of structural systems is also key. In this slide, you can see a table that summarizes the two main systems, commonly used systems for structures or RC structures: PT or post-tension slab and beams, or conventional RC reinforced concrete structures. While PT post-tension is very popular, as it can be lighter, faster, and cheaper than conventional RC slabs, especially for large-scale repetitive buildings, PT slabs are less flexible in the future if large openings or multiple openings for services need to be added to the floor plate. For example, if we were to transform, to repurpose a office building into a hotel or into apartments. As the talk will be available in YouTube, maybe you can refer later to this table in more detail. But I give you an example, again, using our Oxley Towers. Tower 1 has residences and hotel guest rooms, and Tower 3 has offices. Both floor plates have a similar size and geometry. The provision of RC, in this case, versus PT slab for Tower 3 and columns instead of shear walls, despite the initial higher cost and perhaps slightly longer construction cost or construction time, may offer the possibility to easily retrofit the building in the future if there was no demand of office space. Likewise, the provision of RC slab versus PT slab at podium car park floors may offer the possibility to retrofit the car park floors in the future when the public transport network and usage has improved, and cars become less relevant or less present in the city. Another way of making our buildings resilient by making them more adaptable and more flexible is the incorporation of aircon farms, where individual compressors in individual aircon ledges can be grouped together in a common area. This approach has several advantages. You can see the aircon farm in blue in the slide. First of all, the group compressors are put together facing the less favorable views, minimizing as well the noise to the habitable areas, and grouping them allows us to create a sleek, cleaner facade expressions, especially when we use curtain wall. And it offers as well easier maintenance from common areas rather than accessing them from each of the individual units. But very importantly, when we have this facility, hotel and office blocks can very easily be retrofitted or repurposed as residential use when there is no demand for hotels or office space. This is another example of use of aircon farms. This is our 𝐒𝐞𝐿CC Towers in Bukit Nanas. You can see as well the aircon farms in blue at the center of the building. In the earlier slides, in the two early slides, we saw Oxley and 𝐶𝐞𝐿CC and we see here how W Hotel and Residences in KLCC uses a different arrangement. In this case, all the compressors for the aircon for the residential units are grouped together, not at every floor in a certain area of the typical floor, but in a fully dedicated mechanical floor at level 24. This allows the facade to go on without any interruption by the aircon ledges. This is a visual of our star residences in KLCC, and this shows the importance of providing openable windows and even balconies in curtain wall buildings, although may not be the preferred choice, but allows us several advantages. First of all, in the event of a fire or a mechanical or power failure of the aircon system, the provision of openable windows allows ventilation for curtain wall spaces. But also, we have discovered and experienced ourselves through the last 2 years that balconies and outdoor opportunities under lockdown situations are critical, and this is unusual to be provided in tall buildings with curtain wall. So star residences is an example of how this can be integrated in the facade design successfully, as you can see in these images. Imperial Lexis, also in KLCC, is another example of how windows and aircon ledges and outdoor spaces can be provided in a curtain wall building without disrupting the sleek expression of the curtain wall. In this case, every residential unit is provided with a small private swimming pool and an outdoor deck. Here you can see some of the visuals of how this building will look like by this year or by early next year when it's completed. And a last example, Oxley Towers, again, about of how we can incorporate openable windows in a curtain wall building as part of the facade pattern, as part of the facade composition. Interdependency, which is the third principle for resilient design in architecture, talks about how buildings can offer a holistic approach, not only to the site, but to the city and to the community. In star residences, the developer was generous enough to propose the upgrade and the undertaking of the land surrendered to KLCC, to the city, as part of DBKL, sorry, to DBKL, not to KLCC, as part of DBKL's plan to improve the walkability of 𝐒𝐞𝐭𝐮𝐫𝐞. We took this opportunity to create a pedestrian boulevard along the northwest edge of the building, along the retail podium that funnels pedestrians to KLCC, and we call it Walk of Fame. The boulevard along the retail podium, as you can see in the image, sets a precedent for future interventions along 𝐒𝐞𝐭𝐮𝐫𝐞, which will eventually, once the entire street front has been completed, create a continuous pedestrian pathway, and certainly will improve the walkability of this part of the city. Oxley Towers is another example of how our buildings can contribute to creating more resilient cities by improving the walkability in the city. In this case, the towers are set back, forming a arrival forecourt or a plaza that funnels pedestrians through a indoor shelter street, cutting an urban corridor through the city mega block and connecting pedestrians from Yalang Ampang to KLCC, with KLCC and with the mosque. The arrival plaza before the retail facing Yalang Ampang will eventually, once the entire street has been completed, the street front has been completed, create a continuous pathway and will as well improve the walkability along Yalang Ampang. Also, through the indoor street, this urban corridor, we allow pedestrians to walk under shelter from Yalang Ampang to the pocket park at the rear of the building and to KLCC and the mosque. On another hand, mixed-use developments are by default resilient. I explain you why. For example, in Oxley, there are different uses or functions of components. There are residences, there are offices, there are hotels and retail. And all of these uses are independent, but can also support and reinforce each other, creating a city within a city. This reduces the need of commuting and the associated transport pollution, or the time that we spend in doing so, but also allows to centralize and to streamline the security of the building. On another hand, allows us to create or to design buildings and systems which are alive 24/7 versus the regular daily use cycles of single-use buildings that are empty or non-operational at certain times of the day. In this case, the mechanical and electrical services of the building can be designed and streamlined to serve the different needs of the building when certain components are operating concurrently or at alternate times. Within the building as well, the large provision of landscaped areas and outdoor spaces, not only at the ground floor, but at the podium and sky decks and at the sky bridges, provides the building occupants with multiple outdoor opportunities within the compound itself. Indeed, considering the building's footprint, there will be 43% more green areas once the building is completed than before. This is another example of a complex, large-scale mixed development. Is 𝐒𝐞𝐭𝐮𝐫𝐞 for one of our clients. We were commissioned in 2019 to develop the site that you can see marked in red as a business and leisure park, as a mixed-use development. In our proposal, there is a long spine block that accommodates most of the residential units, together with a shorter residential block that you can see at the rear. And at the front, there is a 3-story retail mall with two elliptical blocks sitting on top. The one on the left accommodates a boutique hotel and some Soho units, and the one on the right, or the one in the center, is dedicated to offices. But besides the design attractive of this overall park, the most important gesture that our proposal introduces is a sheltered, semi-outdoor boulevard that at the same time creates a large communal recreational space, plenty of trees, water features, canopies, al fresco, eateries, not only for the community living there, but also, or working there, but also for those who visit the building. But more importantly, this boulevard connects two very important nodes in the master plan: the international school at the north and the hospital at the southwest. Indeed, in 2020, this client invited us to propose another two large areas for this master plan, and we then understood the key role that our first proposal, the business and leisure park, and this boulevard was playing, not only in connecting the hospital and the school, but also in connecting the whole residential district at the east with the entire commercial area or district on the west, and furthermore with the future, or hopefully future, LRT station passing by the west. So through this boulevard, we catalyzed or initiated a key role in this master plan that focuses on urban pedestrian connectivity through a pleasant, user-friendly network of green streets, boulevards, and plazas. The green focus extends as well to the architectural proposal, and indeed every building and almost every piece of roof is colonized by green, by water, creating plenty of outdoor areas where every member of the community, not only those living or working there, but anyone nearby or anyone who wants to visit this master plan, can find their own space, their own outdoor space to be alone or to be together. And these are some of the areas of the landscape areas. Indeed, this building certainly proposes a very extensive program of outdoor and green areas, not only for the community living there, but for the surrounding buildings. Continuing with some of our buildings offering a very strong responsible urban approach that creates and improves the public realm, we have the Selangor State Development Corporation headquarters, or the PKNS headquarters in Shah Alam. Besides the accessible Sky Park, is a continuation of the ground park by the lake. PKNS HQ also responds to the city and to the street front by fragmenting the linear block into smaller permeable blocks that allow visual corridors to the lake and permit a transversal airflow that helps to cool down the building. As mentioned at the beginning, Veritas has not done sustainable and resilient buildings only recently. Indeed, many of these notions and values are strong and visible in some of our early buildings. For example, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Putrajaya. Some of these values and features that are visible and present in these buildings have proven how innovative these buildings were indeed at the time they were proposed. At the ground floor, indoor streets are allow the public to walk through the buildings, creating a pedestrian-friendly city as part of a larger master plan that we did within the area. And also within the building, sky gardens allow people to be in touch with nature, even at the workplace. In 2011, we completed Menara Binjai as the first Malaysian building to be, or Malaysian office to be certified GBI, Malaysia's Green Building Index. And indeed, when the building was being designed, GBI did not even exist. What I'm trying to say is that the building was being already designed to be sustainable since its inception, and indeed it had not a problem to be certified as such when this green rating tool came in place in 2011. After that, Menara Binjai was also certified as Green Mark Gold by BCA. Again, sky gardens, roof gardens create an environment that allows people working in the building to be in touch with nature, even in the middle of the city. The DG headquarters is another project that anticipated the importance of sustainable and resilient workplaces. This is a pioneering paperless office in Malaysia, where we carve a large central atrium that shelters the occupants from the outdoors and allows the whole community to come together. This atrium is a versatile, multi-function space that serves both the daily needs of gathering place, but also for larger corporate events. At the end of the linear atrium that cuts across the entire building and surrounded by a hill, we propose this outdoor space around a water body for colleagues and also for social or corporate events. More recently, we completed the AirAsia headquarters in KLIA2, in this case with a aesthetic that is inspired by aviation geometries. Indeed, you feel that you are walking under the belly of a large jumbo. We created another large central atrium sheltered from outdoors to allow the entire and very large AirAsia community to come together for their daily activities or for their corporate events. Within the atrium, the steel structure that appears like giving shape to the wings of a plane, and even the air traffic control tower makes an appearance in the atrium in the form of a meeting room. But also the roof became unexpectedly a social space. And indeed, a year after we completed the building, Tony Fernandez called us to revisit the roof and to make a landscape proposal at the roof that you can see the before and after in the two pictures. Saloma Link is another example in between Kampung Baru and KLCC. Is the last example that I will show you today of how architecture and urban planning can bring communities together to create a more resilient city. This is a picture that keeps striking me and inspiring me every time I see it. The Klang River and the 6-lane Oxley created a physical disconnection between Kampung Baru and KLCC. So despite being adjacent to each other, there was very limited infrastructure providing a direct access for pedestrians in between the two districts. Saloma Link, as a catalyzer for a much larger urban regeneration program, tried to address this issue by shortening by half the former 30 minutes walk from Masjid Jamek to KLCC to 15 minutes only, or to 10 minutes if you walk from the Kampung Baru LRT station to KLCC. The bridge opened up new opportunities for the users and encourages as well more walkability in the city. And it also allows local economic activities to flourish and contributes to creating a vibrant urban setting. More than just a bridge, Saloma Link is part of an effort to encourage pedestrian and cycling mobility and to promote sustainable urban design with better landscape, street furniture and lighting, envisioning the future development of Kampong Baru. The fourth principle for resilient design in architecture is making our buildings restorative and regenerative. This means creating buildings that are highly engineered and incorporate systems that reduce the demand on fossil energy and infrastructure systems while reducing the carbon footprint. In just a decade, or in only a decade, we have done more than 35 green rated buildings globally up to platinum. Indeed, I think that we are the Malaysian practice that has done the most green certified projects. I will show you some of them very briefly, and I will explain you some of the key achievements or features that those buildings incorporate. We have already spoken about Menara Binjai just now, and its pioneering green certification, its pocket gardens and roof garden. But also within Menara Binjai, or in Menara Binjai, we find our British High Commission, which is the only LEED certified embassy in Malaysia and one of the earliest LEED certified workplaces in the country. Menara Etica, which uses only 40% of the energy used by a similar office building and reduces the carbon emissions of the building by 55%. So it emits only 45% of the carbon emissions that a normal office building of its size, of this size, will do. PKNS, that we have as well spoken about, saves almost 2 million ringgit a year in electricity bill. It uses 40% of the energy used by a typical office building and also emits 45% of the carbon emissions produced by a typical office building of this size. Menara Yeland in Johor was the first office building in Johor Bahru, first grade A office building in Johor Bahru to achieve GBI gold rating, and it saves 1.7 million a year in electricity. It also introduced ultraviolet light filters in the aircon system to improve the quality of the indoor air, anticipating the importance of a healthy work environment. The International School of Kuala Lumpur, or ISKL, is the lowest carbon footprint educational building ever designed in Malaysia. It's a highly engineered building that uses latest technology as part of the learning experience for students. In this way, subconsciously educates the children on a more responsible use of energy and spaces through their education and their daily lives. iScale uses only 56% of the energy and 51% of the water used by a similar international school and saves 2.2 million a year ringgit, 2.2 million ringgit a year in the electricity bill. It also produces only 56% of the carbon emissions as compared to a similar international school. Two last projects. The Reda Women AIDS Organization Orphanage, just completed, has achieved the highest platinum green rating ever in Malaysia for any building. And Petronas Leadership Center. Petronas commissioned us to create their future leadership center as a resilient, self-sustained, and future-proof building. The building settings become part of the learning experience and subconsciously promote among the future leaders of the company of Petronas a more responsible use of spaces and energy. Some of the key technological innovations put in place are the solar panels that literally colonize the entire roof of the buildings. That gray surface that you can see are all solar panels that produce 75% of the energy demand of the building. The remaining 25% basically is imposed by TMB that must be provided by them. So that's why the building does not achieve 100% of the electricity needs with their solar panels. Also, the man-made lake that cools the building and serves as part of the rainwater harvesting and management system. Our Oxley Towers, when completed, will have all its components, hotels, offices, retail, and service apartments, green certified. And last, under this chart, or this chapter, sorry, sustainability and resilience in our winning proposal. We got the third position for the new capital of Indonesia in Kalimantan, where the essential services and the use of the latest technology are put in place to reduce the city's waste and energy consumption, but also, and very interestingly, very importantly, to manage flood and climate change and the certain water level raise expected in the years to come. Probably this only topic worth a talk on its own, so I will not elaborate today. The fifth principle for a resilient design in architecture is durability, and talks about the ability of buildings to offer long-lasting, long-term value to its owners. Building structures are generally designed for a 50 years lifespan, and with regular maintenance, building structures can last 100 years and longer, while building mechanical and electrical systems are designed to last 15 to 30 years, depending on the service, and again, with regular maintenance, can last up to 50 years. On this note, I will just like to highlight the obvious importance of choosing the right materials and specs, especially in severe weathers like ours in Malaysia, with high temperatures, high solar incidence, and high rainfall regime, but also the key importance of maintenance. And this means designing buildings and details that allow easy maintenance, or even better, which require little maintenance, and also studying carefully the maintenance and the maintenance access to the more exposed and less accessible areas of the building, for example, the facade. As an example, an only example, I share with you the ample display of building maintenance units, or BMU, that we use in Oxley Towers, from the telescopic arm gondolas that reach the facade and the tallest crowns in the building, to rope access to clean the bridges facade, or monorail cradles to clean the underside of the bridges, or aerial working platforms to clean the facade at the lower floors. This is a whole display of systems to ensure the access, the maintenance, the cleanliness, the watertightness, but also the safety for all the vertical and horizontal surfaces and members of this very complex building. Resilient buildings are also those which are magnets for financial activities, or are urban catalysts for the development or the regeneration or the growth of a certain area of the city, providing social, environmental, or economic benefits or advantages to the surrounding community. Buildings as well that create value for the neighborhood and for the properties around the building, often more than for the building itself, or simply those buildings which symbolize landmarks that guide the users or the citizens or the visitors in the city. In this regard, we have spoken about urban corridors throughout buildings. Oxley, where we created a shelter indoor street that connects Jalan Ampang and KLCC Park and the mosque through this city mega block, or the business and leisure park where we propose a semi-outdoor boulevard that not only connects neighboring buildings within the master plan, but indeed plays a pivotal role in creating a whole pedestrian network of green spaces in the master plan. Star residences, where the boulevard along the retail podium improves the walkability in this part of the city, or Saloma Link, connecting or bringing together KLCC and Kampong Baru, encouraging pedestrian and cycling mobility and attracting local economic activities to flourish, contributing to a more urban, more vibrant urban setting. More recently, just a few months ago, indeed, we completed a very interesting project where we were called to repurpose one of the blocks within an office complex designed in Damansara in the 70s, late modern architecture, from office to retail. Probably you know, or you have been here to KPD, to complex Pejabat Damansara. Our proposal consisted of upgrading and modernizing the block closer to the main street, to Jalan Dungung, into a contemporary, cozy boutique retail building through a series of very small, almost surgical interventions, both in the inside and the outside of the building, by creating a urban plaza before the building that has already attracted social activities and gathering and is becoming an address and a meeting point in the area, and by uplifting the overall landscape within the compound. And the last principle for resilient design in architecture, the last principle for resilient design in architecture, cultural responsiveness, which talks about our building's ability to reflect the local culture and to create long-lasting memories for the community. Some of our projects appear recurrently in under all these principles for resilient design. In this case, the facade of Oxley Towers was inspired by the 𝐒𝐞𝐿C traditional patterns. Under this waving concept, local visual and cultural references of arts and crafts, in this case, the metallic threads of certain geometrical patterns of 𝐒𝐞𝐿C, are reinterpreted as facade motifs and technology. Some of the most celebrated Islamic patterns were reinterpreted as contemporary facade screens in our PKNS headquarters. Or more recently, indeed now under design stage, the Tree of Life in our Indian High Commission. The Tree of Life, as you may know, is associated with many Hindu gods and has a very pivotal importance in Hindu mythology. It's a mythical symbol or motif that illustrates life in all its aspects, but it also symbolizes personal development and uniqueness and individual beauty. The Tree of Life, in this case, in the Indian High Commission, is used extensively as facade motif over the auditorium, blind walls, but also as facade screen at the drop-off or at the residences. Also, I don't know why that image went off. Also, the geometry of the famous Indian stepwells is explored and reinterpreted to become the facade of the Chancellery building within the Indian High Commission. Saloma Link appears also under this chapter. Again, the design of this pedestrian bridge was inspired by the Siri Junjung, an ornament traditionally offered in Malay weddings as a symbol of unity. This concept signified the importance of uniting the two prominent fabrics of the city with the vision of making KL a more environmentally friendly and walkable city. During the day, the daylight casts shades and shadows from the bridge and creates a breezy and very comfortable, pleasant walk through the bridge. And at night, the LED lighting add colors to the experience, displaying different patterns and motifs or seasonal motifs. Since the bridge opened, it has become a new landmark in the city's public realm, attracting people of KL and tourists to spend their time here while enjoying beautiful views of KLCC. And indeed, it has become one of the most photographed ever places in the city and attractions in the city. Indeed, I guess that all of you have a picture in Saloma Link. So in summary, we have spoken about these 7 principles for resilient design in architecture. We have studied the aspects, the considerations that may allow us to determine whether our buildings are resilient or not under these 7 notions: redundancy, adaptability and flexibility, interdependency, regenerative and restorative, durability, value, and last, cultural responsiveness. Hopefully, when you revisit the design of any of your buildings or urban proposals, you may ask yourselves whether some or all of these principles or values are being taken into consideration, or how your design can contribute to creating more sustainable and more resilient buildings and cities for all for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miguel, for this amazing sharing. Honestly, all I can say is just wow and congratulations. And thank you so much, Doctor, to you and Veritas for having such undying passion for sustainable architecture. Because I really do think that right now we're living in the period of sustainable architecture design. And I'm very glad to see that you and Veritas are really pushing this design philosophy front and center to the world. And I'm sure the audience too felt the movement in integrating sustainability into architecture from the top before. I've enjoyed it very much. So thank you very much once again. So now we'll be heading into our Q&A session. And we have some questions in the chat. So the first question from Penguin: will you consider the building law during the design process of the high-rise building?
Will I consider the building law? I'm not so sure what the building law means. Let me read the question again. Will you consider the building law during the design process of the high-rise building? Actually, I don't quite understand what the question means, but okay. I try to answer. Well, first of all, 2 notions. The first one is that the architecture industry in Malaysia is highly regulated, which is something very positive. So, of course, there is no choice but considering any law when designing any building. But if you ask particularly about high-rise buildings, it's also true that our law and regulations, or UBBL, are a bit outdated and do not truly answer some of the key questions that super tall or tall or very tall buildings, very common today, have. Other than that, Penguin is the person asking. If you want to elaborate a bit more, or I don't know the question, maybe I try to reply to you again.
Yes, I think what Penguin mean probably is how do you put the law in the back of your head when you're thinking about design, because that's a lot of things to manage, right? How do you balance both components?
Okay, well, if that is the question, then I will say that basically that's the difficulty of being an architect, managing the law and regulations, the statutory regulations, the expectations of the client, your own ambition or aim as a designer, and putting all that together, cooking it all together, and making it look good at the end of the day. So how you do it? Well, by training, by doing it many times, and by knowing by heart. When from the very moment that you make any small or big decision, that all those decisions have to respond to a set of regulations that in many cases are purely common sense, and that respond to creating places that are safe, primarily safe for the occupants and for the cities, and second, that meet the purpose of what the building is for. I guess that the more experienced you are, the more trained you are, the easier that all these considerations come together throughout the design process or the thinking process to make choices that are right from early stages of the project. There is not a formula. It's, I guess that just by doing it many times.
I agree. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your answer. And if that does not fulfill your curiosities, Penguin, you can re-clarify yourself in a chat. So let's move on to the next question by 𝐿𝐿𝐿𝐿. What are the biggest challenges when designing green building and high-rise buildings?
Okay. Okay, how to answer that question? First of all, similarly to the previous question, there are notions of architecture that are mandatory, and those are the safety of the building and the meeting the purpose for which the building is designed. But perhaps the biggest challenges when you do a tall building and you want to make it sustainable are about the envelope of the building and the difficulties to get people connected to the ground, to the nature. So the higher you go, the taller you go, the less comfortable that outdoor spaces can be. So the more considerations that you need to take when creating outdoor spaces, for example, and very importantly, the farther you are from the ground, from the natural ground, and the more important that becomes creating these aerial or sky gardens or pocket gardens that permit people to still be in touch with nature. Other than that, technology evolves very quickly, and we need to strive to keep ourselves updated, up to date in the development of technology and latest technology. And yeah, I guess that could be my answer for now.
Sounds like a really, really tall order, but thank you for your answer.
No worries.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next question by Faiz Mislan. Developers prefer cheap system or design rather than system that complies to all standards and regulations. What do you think? How do we accommodate this issue?
Okay, Faiz. First of all, I will not say that developers prefer cheap design. I guess that eventually, or for many developers, this is a business, so they strive to make profit and to satisfy their stakeholders. So well, it's a legit objective, but it's not that they prefer. I wouldn't say that they prefer more economical design rather than complying to the regulations or the standards. The regulations and the standards must be met, so there is no possible escape. So that's out of the question. The standards and regulations must be met, but perhaps in some cases, developers prefer to offer a more affordable product that can also improve their success in getting their products accessible to as many people as possible, which is another of their concerns. So yeah, sorry Faiz, I don't know how to elaborate on this. I think that developers, again, they cannot escape. We cannot escape from meeting the regulations and the standards, and they just legitimately try to make as much profit of their business as they can, and it's a valid approach to business. So I would not necessarily agree to that statement, Faiz.
That's true. Thank you so much. Oh, there's another question from Jeffrey. Okay, there are two questions. So let's go on with the first one first. Is there any challenge for provision of evacuation of elderly during emergency for super high-rise buildings, and how do you mitigate this? Interesting.
Okay. Thank you, Jeffrey, for making a more technical question, not that difficult and commercial as the previous. Yeah, there are challenges for the evacuation of tall buildings, for not only for elderly, but for people with disabilities, and even for people who are fit and can get tired while evacuating a 60 stories building. You get tired, doesn't matter how fit or young you are. So first of all, we can provide staircases that are wider. So if somebody is slower, somebody else can take the person over and can keep the evacuation. We can as well provide refuge spaces, little refuge spaces, normally for wheelchairs, but can be taken by other people, or elderly or people with special needs, to wait to be rescued within the staircase compartment. And this is by law, so this is a provision that must be made. We can as well provide, when buildings are very tall, like Oxley, for example, we can provide bridges that allow people to go down only by a certain number of floors, and after reaching that bridge, they can cross to the next building and take the lift to go down, or just stay there if that building is not at risk. And last, less common, indeed very uncommon still in Malaysia, the provision of a refuge floor, which means that at a certain interval, or maybe in the middle height of the building, there is a floor or a compartment, normally naturally ventilated or well ventilated and protected from any fire, where any person can wait to be rescued and can do so safely. So I wouldn't say, again, that it's only for elderly. It's for anybody who, due to any medical reason or stress reason, may slow down the evacuation and may need to be in a third place to rest or to be rescued.
Thank you so much for your answer. And his second question would be, what is your view on seismic design for super high-rise building in Malaysia?
Okay. The view is not a view, it's more of a requirement. Peninsular Malaysia is not very seismic. Indeed, there is no seismic requirement or seismic consideration when designing buildings in Peninsular Malaysia. The seismic coefficient is very, very low. Unlike in Sabah and Sarawak, that the seismic activity is higher. So there are some seismic factors to be taken into consideration when designing the structures generally. Not only the structure, but also the services. So if I elaborate a little bit more, basically, it's not a choice, it's not a consideration, it's simply a requirement that may be imposed or not, depending on the location. There are seismic factors that are imposed to the structure calculation to resist a seism of a certain degree, if that was to happen. And generally, depending on the severity of the earthquake, it goes from oversizing the concrete or the steel members of the structure to simply doing different ties or overlapping of the rebars on the concrete structure. So there are different ways how the seismic reactions are tackled, or in some cases, if the earthquake was very severe, like may happen, for example, in Japan, there are also systems to tackle the way the foundation meets the superstructure of the building, and so on. This is about the structure for services, say water supply or sanitary piping or wiring or etc. They are flexible connections that are put in place at certain intervals to ensure that if the building moves in a certain manner, the services don't break, causing disruption of the services or even a fire if the pipe or the concealment breaks into two. So there is a set of considerations that architects, structural engineers, and mechanical engineers need to know and need to put in place when there is a certain seismic risk. But as mentioned, in Peninsular Malaysia, does not exist, or at least in KL, I don't want to say something that I'm not so sure. At least in KL, it's not a seismic zone, but yes, Kuching or Sarawak or Kota Kinabalu, Sabah and Sarawak are much more active for seismic activity.
Thank you so much for the very in-depth answer. So we'll be moving on to my question. So personally, I'm very interested in the VERITAS green check. So there are a lot of other green ratings around like GBI and LEED, and there are some differences in their emphasis. Can you tell us more on the emphasis VERITAS green check will be taking in assigning sustainability?
Okay, that's correct. The different green rating tools put emphasis on different aspects. Some of them are on passive systems, some of them on active systems, some of them put much emphasis on values to the community or transportation within, or green transportation or pedestrian connectivity within the building or within the city. So there are several several green tools that put emphasis on different aspects. But in this regard, I will say that our VERITAS Green Check is a fairly neutral tool that takes into consideration all the aspects in a fairly similar manner. So we have better chances to be able to certify our buildings under this green rating tool. So it's not so biased to a certain aspect. It tries to equally consider all of the aspects that may or may not make a building green or sustainable. Hope that replies your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. I hope that initiative will bring more sustainable architecture in Malaysia, and I'm very excited for it. So congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you,
with that, yes. So with that, that's the end of our Q&A session.
There is another question I can see. There is another question that I can see in the chat.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so sorry for missing it. I was too engrossed in your answer. Okay, so another one from AR 𝐒𝐞𝐿Ce. Hi, Dr. Miguel. It was an exciting and insightful talk by you. Your Oxley building services seem to have doubled in almost everything. 4-day water storage, etc. That means to make a building resilient, the construction cost has to increase significantly more too. What's your opinion on that matter?
Okay, thank you, Architect 𝐒𝐞𝐿Ce. That's true. To make a building sustainable or resilient, there is a certain degree of investment that may need to be made by the building owner, but we have not reached that level yet where we are able to quantify how much we need to invest. It's a fairly recent field, resiliency in architecture, unlike sustainability that has been explored and studied by many professionals throughout the last decade. But I will say, if I can take the risk of giving an opinion, that it's not more than 1 to 5%, similarly to the additional cost that may impose achieving a green certified to a green platinum building that we need to invest if we wanted to assure having a resilient building. But on another hand, the concept or the idea is that many of these principles for resilient architecture overlap with those principles of sustainable architecture. So it means that if you wanted to achieve a sustainable building, probably on the way, you're already doing much or taking many steps towards achieving a resilient building as well. So indeed, it's killing two birds with one stone because you are achieving both things with one solution. But I would say as well that there are aspects of building resilience that are not related to any investment, are related to decisions, design decisions that have no cost or no special cost if they are taken properly from the beginning. For example, when you recess the building to create a more walkable city and to create a wider pathway, you are not investing any money. You are just making a design decision. Or if you create a corridor throughout the building to improve walkability through a building that otherwise will be very large, like it happens very often in KL, that you need to go around a huge parcel to go from point A to B because it's impossible to go across. So by making these simple steps, you don't really invest anything, but you are already helping, you're already contributing to make the city more walkable, and that makes your building more resilient as well. Or by adopting certain local cultural motifs in your facade or your screens or your lobby, you are creating spaces that are memorable, that are relevant to the people, and you don't really invest much. You will just do any design anyway. So not necessarily you need to invest or to put in place some additional capital to make your building more resilient. That's why there are these 7 principles, and you can choose some of them to make your building resilient or resilient in some manners. Not all of them are technical, or not all of them impose some investment. I hope, Architect 𝐒𝐞𝐬, that this replies your question.
Thank you so much for your answer. I really think that's a very good point, because when we're talking about sustainable architecture, maybe a lot of us would not think about it in so much details, in ways that it involves services and all these more technical details. I think this chat is a very insightful one for students, for me especially when I'm a student in approaching sustainable design, as it kind of did open my eyes to more details that I have to pay attention to when dealing with sustainable design, let's say. So there are no questions left, and with that, we can close this session. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight's online lecture. We hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Dr. Miguel, for joining us and giving us time for this talk. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. This lecture is recorded and the link will be posted in our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So do keep in touch with our MASA's Instagram and Facebook for the next online lecture. We will be having our next online lecture series on next Thursday with our speaker, Dr. 𝐭𝐿CC𝐿 and architect Farah. Also, if you haven't done it yet, you can also register for PAM membership at www.mypam.org.my. There are a lot of benefits for architecture students, and most importantly, it is free. So until then, have a nice night, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful night.